Welcome. My name is Kate and I work with ME Auckland, an Auckland-based charity that provides symptom management advice and education, advocacy, community connections and emotional support to people and their carers with ME CFS, associated conditions and now long COVID. We aim to improve the lives of those with these conditions and their whānau by providing accessible support not otherwise available through the public health system. Just briefly, ME stands for myalgic encephalomyelitis, and it's commonly known as chronic fatigue syndrome, or abbreviated to ME CFS. ME is a complex, chronic, multi-system physical disease that affects between 25,000 and 40,000 New Zealanders and around 10,000 Aucklanders, and it's classed by the World Health Organization as a neurological condition. These interviews aim to give an insight into the experiences of people with ME CFS and long COVID while raising awareness about these debilitating conditions to help people with these conditions get the help they need to live their most fulfilling life. So with that introduction over, I'm delighted to welcome Vicky, who will be talking with us today about her journey having ME. So welcome, Vicky.
Hi, Kate, and thank you so much for this opportunity to share a little bit about myself and my story with ME here.
Oh, thank you. It's a pleasure to be talking to you. So I understand that you have lived with ME for a very long time. Are you able to share a little bit of what life was like before you got sick?
Well, as you know, part of the ME picture is memory loss. So me going back over 38 years, which is when I first got diagnosed with this, is quite a challenge. But I do remember feeling young and full of energy. I was probably in my 20s, late 20s when this kicked in. So it is going back quite a long way. And I guess I had lots of hopes and dreams and aspirations of most young people, probably wanting to travel and see the world. And I have managed to do a lot of that stuff, but a lot of my life since then has been what I call an uphill battle. Whereas before that, life just seemed to be easy and it was easy to flow from one thing to the next. And ever since I got sick with this, it's been about managing my life every day, probably most moments in every day, having some capacity of needing to manage things, to get through it in a good way.
It has to be very tightly managed, ME, for sure. So what happened originally that led you down this path?
Well, when I pieced things together, I was on 2 or 3 courses, heavy duty antibiotics, because I had wisdom teeth problems. And then at some point, not long after that, within the space of a few months, I got really sick with some kind of a virus, and I had some strong new type of antibiotics for that. And I never felt well afterwards, never felt well. So and that was going back to the early 1980s.
Wow, yeah, that sounds really tough. So what were the main symptoms that you experienced? So obviously you had this virus and were still sick with kind of, normal virus-like symptoms. And then did it just stay like that, or what were your symptoms going forward?
No, so I kind of recovered from the virus symptoms. It was a respiratory cold flu type bug, whatever it was. But all I remember is these moments, these waves of total exhaustion would just come at me out of nowhere, and I felt like I was dying. That was the sense I had, was like, this is not right, something's wrong. But I didn't know who to go to with it. There was nobody to really talk to about it. It just came and went, but they were profound when they happened. I just remember standing on a street corner, just feeling like I had nothing, no energy reserves left in my body to make the next step to the bus stop.
Mm.
Yeah.
That must have been quite scary as a 20-something-year-old.
Yeah, it was. It was just so bizarre and so weird, and it didn't seem to be connected or linked to anything specific that I was aware of. Yeah, and
Some
it went
people
on like that for a few years, I guess.
some people with ME have other symptoms as well. They talk about brain fog and headaches and body aches. Have you experienced those sorts of symptoms too?
Yeah, definitely not back then when it first started. It was more this just feeling of absolute exhaustion, fatigue, and just not feeling right in my body. But those other symptoms kicked in over the years. So I guess I was probably in my 30s, early 30s, when I started to get body pain. And then I got severe migraines when I was in my 40s. I had a late pregnancy at 40. It was my third pregnancy, an unexpected one. It was very tough to get through that pregnancy. I was very unwell through it. And then after that, I had migraine headaches on a regular basis. And that's been my story ever since. At one point, they were so bad, I was having migraines 3 days out of 7. They were very debilitating, and a whole lot of other body pains. And that's when I figured I also had fibromyalgia. I'd had a diagnosis. I actually got a diagnosis of ME in 1986. I went to see Dr. Roger Leach, who was an anthroposophic GP practicing in Auckland, and he was the one that diagnosed me. And he put me on some treatment for candida. That really helped a lot. I lost a lot of weight then, but I needed to. And I started feeling better after that. And then I left Auckland and came to live on Great Barrier Island. So I lost that connection with him. And ever since then, I've been managing it myself.
It's quite common for people with ME to also have associated conditions like fibromyalgia. And we haven't, I don't think researchers yet figured out why that is. But it is, complex and multi-system.
Yeah.
So you just talked about managing, your symptoms, and what sort of tools, strategies, or supplements, or what have you used to help you manage the symptoms over the years?
Many, and many and varied, because as you know, when you get really sick with something, you want to reach out, you just want to grasp at anything. And I knew the medical system didn't have anything to offer me at that stage because they barely even recognized it. So over those years, I've tried everything from aromatherapy to all kinds of different supplements. I mean, I take right now vitamin C, magnesium, and zinc every day, vitamin D, whole lot of other things. I've spent thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars. This is my biggest outlay, apart from paying the big bills on the house. This is my biggest outlay, is just keeping myself afloat through using supplements and nutritional support. I found super helpful homeopathy and also herbal remedies, but I can't take those at the moment because I'm very, very sensitive to anything that's strong. I've had a big dive in the last year. So yeah, but they were really helping. Also regular treatments with osteopath or chiropractor. Acupuncture was wonderful, but because I live in a remote place, I have to take what's on offer here. So yeah, otherwise it involves travel to Auckland and there's cost involved with that. So, but it's been ongoing. There's never been a time in the last 30 years I can remember where I haven't had to take something to help me get through my day.
Absolutely. Yeah, that does sound like a lot. And I know how much supplements cost. So the cost of maintaining, the part of your health that you do have, there is a big cost to it with people with ME. Yes. Lots of people also talk about pacing. Is that another tool that you use?
Yeah, pacing. I do have to pace myself really carefully. I have to plan my day. And and I have to write everything down, because if I don't write it down now, I don't remember what's even ahead of me. Even if I've read it in the morning, I can't remember what I'm doing in the afternoon. So I have to manage myself according to that. I do have rituals. So my morning ritual for me now is really important. I'm fortunate in that I don't have to get up to go to work because I work from home. So my mornings are super slow, and I do a lot of self-care. So I do guided meditations when I'm still in bed for about half an hour, and then I've got little rituals I do to welcome myself into the day in a good way. And I go down to the beach because I live right by the beach, and I usually have a quick dip in the ocean if it's not too cold, and have a gentle wander or sit there for a while, and then I start my day. And then I usually rest in the early afternoon. If I miss my rest, I'm usually pretty tired by the time late afternoon, evening comes. If I'm going out in the evening, which I don't do very often now, but I have to rest. If I don't rest, I'm really struggling, and then I'll have a really bad day the next day if I don't get enough sleep, or I'm overtired from the day before. Guaranteed to give me a migraine. Yeah.
Sounds very, very well controlled. And it must be difficult sometimes to have to be that controlled.
Oh, is it ever? I yearn for the time where I can just give that away and just live like anybody else, be spontaneous. I mean, I do bring spontaneity in, but in a managed way. It's like I have to think very carefully before I do most things, whereas I'm the kind of person that just wants to jump in. I've always been full of life, full of enthusiasm, excited about going on adventures. But if I just do that, then I suffer the consequences. So it's a struggle for me, and every day I just yearn to be in that place where I don't have to manage things anymore. I can just flow. I can just flow. Yeah. And I miss that. I have grief around that.
Yeah, absolutely. I can imagine how you would yearn for that, for sure. You mentioned before about being having a bit more of a struggle more recently.
Yeah.
Would you like to talk a little bit about why that is and what happened?
I would, because I think it's important that this message gets out there. I was advised to have a vaccine last year for COVID because I'm immune compromised. And my work at that stage was involving overseas travel, because I train people, and I was part of an international team. So for me, it was more about the travel than anything else. And I took the vaccine, and within 10 days, I was in Auckland Hospital. I had an emergency evacuation by helicopter with a transglobal amnesia attack. So I have very little memory of what happened, but ever since that time, my health has taken a massive downward dive. And it's been a really huge struggle just to keep my head above water. I feel like finally now getting a wraparound help system around me that's also costing me lots of money, but I just have to do it to keep myself in a good way. I'm starting to see a little bit of light at the end of the tunnel, but it's been a really, really difficult journey. I've been really depressed, probably for the first time in my life, where I've felt like there's no end to this. Yeah, it's been very painful. I've had terrible headaches. I've had the brain fog has been unbelievable, and just being able to focus has been really hard. So my work has been really difficult, and even getting my words, finding my words. And I've become super sensitive to lots and lots of different foods. So I've been gluten and dairy free for a number of years now, and that helped a lot. But now it's gone out to a whole lot of other things. I got diagnosed with mast cell activation syndrome back in October last year. and went on a low histamine diet, and that helped a lot with anxiety, because I've always been a highly sensitive person, so anxiety has been a part of my picture since I was a child, which has probably also led to this illness. But the anxiety levels have settled a lot with that low histamine diet, but I've also become super sensitive and I've lost lots of weight. So, and I'm concerned about that. I'm a small person. I'm 47 kilos now. It's not enough.
It sounds incredibly scary to have had a vaccine and have that happen to you, but also have very little memory of what actually happened. What did the doctors in the hospital say and do?
I was able to say when I went in that I thought it was a reaction to the vaccine, because I hadn't been feeling well for about 4 or 5 days after that. Before that, sorry. And they, the neurologist that I saw in the emergency ward, she did report it to CALM. I tracked that. I checked that had happened. And it was the actual episode itself. I don't remember a lot about, but I do remember thinking like, oh, this must be what it's like to have Alzheimer's. And I wasn't too worried, because I just had to let myself be looked after. Whereas normally I have to do all the controlling. But it was a moment where I just had to let go. And there was quite a good learning in that for me, actually. But when I think back, and whenever I hear the helicopter coming overhead, I go into PTSD. My body remembers the trauma of it, even though my mind doesn't. Yeah.
Our bodies are very good at keeping the score, actually. And the PTSD is fascinating, how it eventuates. It's not just people going off to war. It is something that everyday people can experience from trauma.
But I also wanted to say that my local health team have been very supportive. They've fought really hard for me to get a vaccine exemption. I was one of the handful of people that managed to get that, but my doctor had to write to 5 different specialists in order to get that back in November last year. And I take my hat off to her for her dedication to that. So they have supported me, but they haven't really been able to help me other than refer me to a neurologist. So I'm still waiting 2 months down the track to see a neurologist, because I've got some really crazy mobility issues now. So I feel like I'm on a boat 24/7, like on a rough sea. And sometimes my legs give way under me, and it's very unpleasant, very, very unpleasant.
It does sound incredibly unpleasant, and especially going from being reasonably well and functioning, beforehand.
Yeah.
I find it incredible that it took so much to get a vaccine exemption when you were clearly airlifted in a helicopter to hospital after having the vaccine. And it just, that astounds me.
Yeah. The other thing is the ACC component, because I was turned down for ACC because of my history with chronic fatigue. Right. And so I'm about to reapply for it.
So ACC are kind of, so for people who may not be aware, you can actually apply to ACC for a vaccine injury. However, you're saying, Vicky, that they are turning you down because you had chronic fatigue before and they're just seeing it as a relapse?
Yes, that's right. So this is why it's important, I think, for me to see a neurologist, because all manner of new symptoms have come that I haven't ever had before, and just to see what's actually going on there. But I don't know. Yeah. Again, I think part of, for me, the picture now is this whole thing of fight or flight. I've lived in fight or flight for most of my life, and I know that's been contributing to the whole chronic fatigue thing. And I reached a point last year where I was so upset and so angry about what was going on, and about the lack of recognition and acknowledgement out there for these injuries. It got me into a more severe state. And so I got to the point where I had to stop fighting. And now I don't want to fight anymore. So if I'm going to pursue this pathway again, I have to have advocacy on board. So that's part of this wraparound thing that I've set up for myself. But again, that's only come because I've really fought for it. I've actually got out there and said, this is what I need, please help me.
Fight response is a fascinating one, and it does absolutely play a role in anybody's life who might have chronic illness or stress or what have you, and you know, being able to either have some control or feel like you're supported, have advocacy, feel like you're not having to have an uphill battle all the time in your life is really important for that fight response. And I know it's one of the things that many people with ME struggle with, because they have felt unheard or not looked after with the system. So, you know, I really appreciate you sharing your thoughts on this. You've been a member of ME Auckland for a while. What support have ME Auckland provided for you?
So actually, I've only been a member not for very long, probably for about 6 months. And I kind of resisted because part of me is also, I don't want to be labeled with my disease. So for me, it's been really important to not to try to attach myself to it too much. And obviously that's a really fine line there because it's so present with me. But when I got so low towards the end of last year, and I started reading, a friend of mine who lives in Australia now, but she used to live here, she's also got ME, she's kind of connected me up with it. And I've just found it to be a really beautiful source of support in lots of ways. So since I touched in with the Facebook page, I've had contact from people like yourself and Natalie, and who are seriously interested in hearing my story, because I think sharing our stories is a huge part of being honored and acknowledged. And the other thing I've found is some really useful tips in there. You've sent me names of doctors that are sort of ME or mast cell activation syndrome friendly. And also I listened last week to a really beautiful podcast, it wasn't a podcast, or actually it was a live session with a guy called Dan, I think he's in Australia, and who was talking about something that touched me really, really powerfully, was this whole thing of like, there is no cure. Get that word cure out of your mind, because I know what it's like when you're really sick. You just want to grab a fix, you know, you want to feel better, but look on it as recovery. And that sat so strongly with me this week. It's just like, yeah, you know, I can recover. Each day I can recover a little bit more. And, you know, maybe I'll get to a full recovery, maybe I won't. It's possibly unlikely at my age now, having had this for so long, but it doesn't matter. You know, it's like taking those steps to recovery, to live in a good way, because that for me has always been the focus of my life, the focus of my day, is how can I get through this day in a good way and find the beauty and the magic and have some sense of purpose where I can be of service as well. Yeah. And I think, you know, you guys got a lot to offer in the way of that.
Oh, thank you. Yes, I love that about the recovery, and, you know, and the steps that people make are very incremental. So sometimes they're hard to see, but the improvement, it can happen, and it can be seen if you look back. Even though we do have bad patches where we feel like nothing's changed. Yeah. Well, I'm glad that the service has been of help to you, and I hope you're able to continue to, you know, get something from the Facebook support group and the services that we have.
Thank you.
When you look at your future, what kind of gives you hope?
So I think for me, I've got hope around the whole thing that now long COVID is in the picture, that there's finally going to be some recognition for us and some time and investment by the New Zealand government into getting some specialists on board because there are none in this country. So I think that gives me hope. The other thing that gives me hope are the things that I like to look forward to. So I'm an adventurer, I'm a traveler. And yeah, if I've got something on the horizon to look forwards to, like I've just got an event happening in September, I've just found out about, I'm excited about that, you know, so I live towards things like that. And also just the sun, you know, when I wake up in the morning and I see the sun, that fills me full of hope. So, and the beauty, when I look around at all the beauty around me and the beautiful people that are in my world, and the amount of love and care that has come my way gives me hope. And I want to say that acknowledge the good things about this journey. For me, it's around learning to surrender, particularly in this last 11 months with what's gone on, and allowing myself to receive and to ask for the help I need for, because that's something I've struggled with all my life. But now, you know, this for me has been the beauty of this part of the journey, even though it's been really hard and I wouldn't wish it on anyone. There's always gold in there somewhere, you know, and it's really important, and looking for the golden things gives me hope too.
I love that. That's fantastic. It is definitely about, you know, the small things in life, and, you know, we've got to look at what we can do and what we do achieve from what we do, as opposed to looking at the things that we can't do. And I love your outlook. I think you've done incredibly well throughout your life, given that this started for you in your 20s, and you know what you have managed to achieve, and who you are as a person. I think it's fantastic, and I think you have a lot to offer other people, and I know that people will get a lot from listening to this interview. Is there anything else that you want to add before we wrap up?
Yeah, I think one thing I want to say is that I just want to acknowledge nature as my healer and as my go-to for real deep nurturing and support. Yeah, I just couldn't have survived through this without my deep connection with nature, and I just want to acknowledge that. And yeah, that's been a powerful part of my healing journey. Yeah.
That's wonderful. Nature is a powerful healer. And do you walk barefoot? Because I think, you know, grounding something that we just don't do enough of nowadays. We've always got shoes and socks on, and you know, I listened to an expert talk on a podcast one time where they talked about shoes being the worst invention in the world. We're not grounding ourselves, and you know, we do have a current that runs through us, and we are part of nature, and actually we do need nature and we do need grounding. And I think that we're incredibly lucky living in New Zealand, having the nature that we do surrounding us. Yeah.
I walk barefoot every day, and I have to say that I'm from England originally. I came to New Zealand in 1985. One of my joys was witnessing in Auckland City back in the 80s the kids walking to school barefoot down the road, because that never happened in England. You had to wear shoes, but I walk barefoot every day. I love walking barefoot. I've got tough feet now.
I bet you do. I bet you do. Yeah, no, whenever my boy wants to take his shoes off, I'm very encouraging of it. But yeah, I need to do that more. I think you're going to be my inspiration to get my feet out of my shoes more. So, well, that's wonderful, Vicky. It's been fantastic to talk to you this morning, and I wish you all the best for your journey with the wraparound service that you have put around you at the moment. Yeah, I hope that your upwards journey keeps going for you, and you keep continuing to get better.
Thank you so much, Kate. It's been great talking to you, and I hope this inspires and helps and supports others, because I think we're all here to help do that for one another. And if I can do that in a good way for somebody else, then that's a good part of my day.
Absolutely, yeah, and I agree with you for sure. Thank you so much.
Thanks again, Kate. Take care.